Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Legion, a great episode. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Now, I've talked about this before where I felt like David was never the full-blown villain. He's done some, questionable stuff. She definitely stuff in the later parts of season 2. Obviously, it's just a whole thing of, he's kind of... It's he's trying his best. He wants to be good. He believes he's good. He deserves to be loved. That whole thing. But I feel like this is the first episode where he went full-blown villain. Because especially he goes after that division truck. And those Vermilions are coming towards him. They get close and they turn to glass. He teleports into the vehicle. He literally puts some of the people from Division into the wall. This is reminiscent of the whole situation back in season 1 when he attacked Division, which obviously at the time you're like, oh, that was Farouk taking over his body, but subsequent things have kind of been no, that was kind of David on his own, kind of showcasing if that was David and him doing this, it kind of shows you that him putting their bodies in the walls like that, which to be fair, he also did in Clockwork too. That wasn't him, that was Sydney in his body by accident, but that still shows you he's capable of doing it. So that means somewhere on some level that even though it might have seemed like that was Farouk in control, that was potentially him, this kind of solidifies that. Even at one point, he slides one dude all the way down into the ground, almost grinding him in, to the point that when the van moves, you see a long streak of blood. It's oh my god. He blasts one Vermilion into pieces that there's nothing but bloodish ink on the... It's holy crap. Then he gets to Clark's husband. It's oh, where's Switch? Oh, my mind has been prepared against this, so you won't be able to... Oh, really? How about I just wipe your long-term memories? Jesus, David. Those are the type of things that's kind of oh, that's some like I said, some stuff that you would kind of blame Farouk for earlier in the series. And it's oh yeah, I'm your friend David. Now tell me where Switch is. Oh, okay, she's on the airship. He's what airship? So there's that. He goes back home. Even more people have showed up. Once again, that whole weird thing of daddy. It's wow. So there's continuation of that. A lot more people. He's looking for Lenny. Lenny's obviously going through something. And there's that moment, all those people are just kind of getting on his nerves because it's it's too much noise. So he sends them away. The other people walk in. Did you kill them? He's no, I didn't kill them. There's someone else. It's they're somewhere else. And it's just how nonchalant he's about it. It's I don't know. Maybe it makes you wonder. It almost seemed like David probably had a thing. It's wait, I didn't kill them. Did I kill them? No. They're just off some pocket dimension or something. I put them in, or probably just teleported them to some other location. Whatever the case may be. Lenny's there. Obviously, Lenny's dealing with everything, and I love David's interpretation. He's no. That my mom was just made up by the time demon. Same thing with the baby. It's no, I felt her. It's I don't think that wasn't a trick. It was the time demons accelerating life around her. I don't know. Or maybe it was a trick. I assumed it was the former, not the latter. I didn't think it was a trick like David. I thought it was just kind of a cruel thing of having your entire life fast forwarded in front of you, whether it be Salmon's death or your child. I don't know. The daughter's name was Violet, right? And it's just that's enough to kind of mess someone up and just wake up and it's just dust beside you. It's just it's enough to kind of break you, especially because it's the hard-hitting moments of that child's life and just how important you are. You're there every moment, but when you're not, because you're being fast-forward through all this, it's super messed up. The time demons did her wrong, and I think they're kind of very like I said, a Cheshire cat. They like messing with people's heads, and they're very mischievous in that regard. So we saw what they did with David, and we see what they did with her. And that was so fascinating. To the point Lenny's you know what? I need help. The fact that was my family. It's but no. Where are your family? Because even Lenny's being I was better off on my own before all of this. It's yeah, I had my issues and stuff like that, but still, I was better off. The fact is, it's you made this worse because it's okay, when we left, we had our plan, and I guess it's we were going to build our family and stuff like that, but all this ended up transpiring because David wanted to do his own thing. It's we were going to go out there, make the world beautiful, have this family, kind of spread happiness, but then you had to go and try to go, you know what? I found a time traveler. I'm going to switch everything up, so just everything didn't go according to plan, and David's plans just kept going, and it just it took so much for Lenny to the point, David's trying to be like, oh, maybe if we go back in time, we can save him. It's like, I don't think so. I think it's one of those probably constants, like the time demons, they rust you, they kill you. There might not be any, they might be kind of like a erase you from every moment in time type of thing. I don't know. It's like a liar. So Lenny didn't believe him because it's like, you're just need me by your side. And Lenny's like, I'm not yours. And then she stabs herself in the neck. I was like, gee, I wasn't expecting that. And it's an interesting point too. It's like, you see that David is remorseful, but then there's a part of you that's like, well, is he remorseful because he lost an ally, or is he remorseful because Lenny is gone? So, I mean, there's also the aspect that, once again, still doesn't get talked about this season. Let's not forget that's still Amy's body. So there might be that sentimental angle to it as well. It's just hard to say where the way they've painted David is hard to say what. I think there's still enough of David, once again, that whole human mask. Maybe there's enough of that left that he is a good enough person that's what it, manifested itself as. At the same time, we've got everything on the airship. Farouk is like, now we need to go to David. I can beat him. And it's like, Sydney's like, I thought you said he was stronger than you. Like, yes, but he's frantic right now. He's caught up in his emotions. I am strategic. I can win. But rather than facing David, because it's like, well, we've got, Switch locked up. Why don't we go to space? And I love, Carrie being like, what? We're going to space? Awesome, that's dope. Interesting enough, too, there's a whole thing about Switch, too, like that dream she was having. I also love that lines of, the whole problem of being a time traveler and stuff like that. It's like, basically, you exist, because you're a time traveler, you exist in all time, which makes it so you exist in no time. That basically, you're not grounded to one particular time. So when you're spread so much across the timeline, how do you basically call one particular time, one particular place in history and time your home? Even the whole thing of that aspect of being a time traveler makes time travelers the most loneliest creatures in the world, which is kind of interesting. I guess that's what ends up kind of drawing Switch and David together, because they are very, very lonely people, for it's somewhat different. But then there's the whole thing of showing that she lifts up her hair, and in the back there's a wind up key, to a wind-up toy. So it's like, oh, so it's like, is that supposed to mean she's one of her dad's androids? And that's the question, because she made that whole point earlier in the season, she would go and pretend to be one of her dad's androids. I even recapped it at the beginning of this, but I was like, so is that supposed to mean she is one, or is she not? Or is that supposed to just be part of her feelings of oh, I feel like I am one? Maybe she just feels not right, not human or something. I guess much like David, she's trying to fix things. Maybe she's just trying to find her own place in the world and everything, hence why she's with David. But it was so fascinating. So there's that. They're flying high. Farouk basically, and just kind of shows you how Farouk doesn't care. He basically pinpoints David where they are, because for him it's oh, my boy, and then it's the whole conversation, which I didn't even think about this last episode, when Farouk says it, this episode of gods make their own rules, they don't follow others. And there's I forgot, I was right, David referred to himself as a god last episode. That was a whole conversation between him and Farouk. It's we're gods, we're kind of, but then Farouk was kind of oh, you're not ready. You're just still kind of stuck in your childish mindset. But it's David kind of stepped up to kind of thinking of himself as a god, hence that more narcissistic angle to everything. He never had a god complex last episode. Farouk did, but now David referred to himself as a god. I didn't think about what that means stepping forward, So basically, he brings his girls aboard. Obviously, there's division people disappearing. Even the Clark situation, because Clark's watching videos of his husband and child. I'm assuming which that's even more morbid situation. I've forgotten I was right, they have a kid together too, and it's oh. And he probably most likely doesn't remember his kid. I guess Clark got the news from Division 3 about his husband and everything. So he's watching those videos being oh, those memories, that stuff I remember, but he won't. David showing up and being hey, and Clark being I should have killed you when I had a chance. I was yeah, you should have. And we see what he did. He ended up popping all the division people that popped out of place. They were all put in space along with Clark. I'm jeez. You have Carrie. She's fighting all the different ladies that are there, kind of I guess that's maybe kind of what they're kind of potentially leaning towards, kind of David, because he is kind of a cult leader, kind of, I guess they're kind of making him to a certain extent, kind of like a Manson level thing. I guess, him being kind of like this big evil and stuff like that. That might be kind of like the metaphor that they're going for. But obviously, like, these ladies that are under his control, calling him daddy and stuff like that. Hell, I'm not that familiar with Charles Manson. That might be what that might be referencing to a certain extent. Maybe not. Maybe I'm just grasping at straws. But like I said, there might be parallels, but that might not be like the direct parallel that they're trying to make. But there could be parallels that you can see between them. Regardless, David comes to Sydney, and Sydney's like, okay, I'm not even mad anymore. I'm like, yeah, you were pissed for a while. I mean, rightfully so. But she's like, I'm not mad anymore. She's like, if you want to know where Switch is, she's here. And like, wait, why would you tell me? It's like, because, she's kind of done with this fighting and stuff like that. It turns to this whole interesting conversation of kind of like the back and forth. And it's like, okay, like, you left. And he's like, no, you left first, essentially. It's like, you abandoned me. It's like, just like Lenny abandoned me. She abandoned me like my parents did and you did. And, you have her trying to be sympathetic. I was like, this came out of nowhere. I was like, are you really feeling? I mean, part of me is also wondering, is like, are you just trying to say that, do all this so David doesn't just outright kill you? There is a part of him that loves Sydney and always will, so that's always going to kind of cloud his judgment, which is kind of the whole point. Because, Farouk made that statement of like, she needs to kind of put on her emotional charm to kind of bring David in, and he won't see the knife coming in his back, essentially, But it led to some interesting stuff, because also depending on how time travel works, like I brought up before in this continuity, I think it works like most time travel stuff, where it's like you change the past, you change your future, present, future. Like obviously the future has to change to reflect the new timeline that's been created by the changed past and everything. And so basically all of this will be undue. And that's even David's point of view of being like, oh, we don't have to worry about all these dead people, whether it be Clark or Lenny. It's all okay. Once I undo everything, it'll be good. But then, it's like Sydney talks about the fact that so much would be undone. You and me would never meet potentially, which we've seen alternate timelines where that is the case last season. And that in itself is kind of like one of the hardest thing about this too. It's like the most painful thing is being erased. Like all of this would be undone. They wouldn't not exist. Their experiences wouldn't have happened. It's kind of a scary thing when you think about it from an existential point of view. But she's like, I love you. And he's like, I love you too. And in that moment, she switches bodies with him. It's like, ooh, poor David. Gets to Carrie, who's about to be finished off by some of the ladies. But I guess, like, because you have Sydney apologizing, it's like saying, like, it's not your fault, it's mine. I guess it's her saying, like, this is more so because I put this situation in motion, or whether she's referencing, kind of saying specifically her by pretending to still be David, by being like, no, this is David's fault for putting you in this position. I'm sorry you have to die, but this is for the greater good. But the real twist is when she's inside of David's head, she's not alone. There, other Davids pop up like, wait, why are you here? She's like, wait, who are you? I am Legion. The other David's like, I am Legion. And then a whole bunch of other Davids pop up. And that's kind of leading itself into like, okay, so this is the whole Legion thing. Once again, I was never 100% sure what the whole Legion thing necessarily meant for David. But it's something that really didn't fully come into effect until last season. You got bits and pieces of it earlier in the season, but then obviously it's not till near the end of the season, of season 2, where it really presents itself. But it was only like 1 or 2, but now it's like a multitude, kind of showing you David's craziness, but at the same time it's like it's not just David. But because of that, it makes Sydney takeover kind of hard, because like in the moment she and it's kind of interesting, kind of going back to the whole multiple realities. Who killed David in one of those realities? It was Carrie slicing him, and before she could even bring the blade down, David's like, oh, too bad, knocks her back, but it's not David, it's one of the others in his head. And it's like, oh, we got to get David back. Well, how are we going to do it? How do we stop her from being an issue? Well, she wanted to worry about it if we block her mind, if she doesn't have a mind. And it's like, what? So they grab David, they pull him out of Sydney's body, and it seems like they lock her away. The question then becomes, did they lock her away inside of her own mind, inside of her body, or did she do that? Did they lock her away somewhere inside of it? I'm assuming just because of what it looks like of them piling on her, like I would assume that's all in David's mind. So her consciousness is somewhere locked in David's mind, which further interesting thing is because let's not forget that's exactly what happened in season 1. Farouk did that to David back in season 1, and obviously the same thing happened to Farouk for a little while as well. So it's just kind of interesting, like that kind of coming back like that, which is like, whoa. Even David being like, I'm sorry, but once I fix all this, you won't have to worry about that. So he goes and tracks down Switch, but Farouk's waiting. And I love that line of like, we will kill you. And it's like, I will. And it's like, okay, because even that means that's something that must have recently developed to the point that even Farouk isn't aware of it, or maybe they were so buried in David's subconscious that he, once again, kind of showing you that there was already something wrong with David. As we can see, it's like a combination of stuff he got from his mom and stuff from his dad. But I think the thing is, David was always crazy. Farouk didn't help it. He just agitated, and he became an outlet for like, oh, you're the reason why everything was wrong with me. Everyone kind of jumped to that conclusion, but David was already kind of not in the most healthiest mindset, it seems, and so it's interesting, like, obviously, because Farouk's like, no, you're my son. Like, the fact is, because it's like, oh, you think I hate you? Hating you would be like hating myself. But he's like, but David's like, yeah, you might look at me as your son, but I look at you like a cancer. And it's like, oh, dude. And lo and behold, what ends up happening is David fights back and he puts the device on Farouk. Switch wakes up and she activates the time hall and she pushes Farouk through. I was like, dude, that's so dumb how that looked. And he's trying to fight to stay in, but he ends up getting pushed through. And the realm they went to last episode to fight the time demons, that kind of realm, in between time, that place, he ends up there, which I was about to say maybe the time demons are there, but it's like, no, that's just a location in itself. That's just a place that they could go to fight the time demons on an even playing field, but that's not where they actually are, because obviously they're in that time hallway. So now it becomes a whole thing of like, oh man, we're reunited and everything. All right, let's go. She's like, but wait, you're just okay with everything being as it is? Like, so many people are dead, you're just okay with that? And then they burst into a song, which is so interesting because obviously that same thing happened last season when David fought Farouk. And it's like not just Switch and David singing, and not just both Carries singing. It's also Sid's body singing, Clark dead in space singing, a dead Lenny singing, and just like literally everyone is singing, even Patanomy and the Vermilions that are with him. It's like, what's up with these full-blown musicals? It's like, okay, we're going to go back in time. It's like, no, we only got to do it one time and all of this can be fixed. But we're not going back to that moment with me of a baby, which is like, okay, so what? Because it's like, as long as we do this really quickly, we don't have to worry about the time demons. Once I fix that, it'll be no issue. So what is the particular moment he's going back to? It could be any number of things, but maybe he's going to go back to the time where his dad fought Farouk, and rather than letting his dad potentially kill Farouk, he's going to straight up go there and kill Farouk. Maybe not. It's going to be interesting to see. But what was really interesting is the final shot where you see like the gate that, the doorway that Switch opens. It was flipping. It was showing that it stayed open. It didn't close behind them. I think kind of and you kind of hear like the time demons kind of snickering. So I think it's supposed to represent like, oh, like you let us through before. You were making us be scared. But the fact of the matter is we're here, and the fact is you're here. So you're in this time hall, so we don't have to worry about it. So we can cause as much destruction as we want, as much mischief as we want. So they're probably going to break through into the world. And while David's trying to fix everything, it's going to be a race against the clock as they're destroying time. But maybe them destroying time and everything is going to affect his attempt to stop everything. He might even have to fight more time demons. It might even be a situation where he wipes them out, which is it even possible? Is there a finite number of them? Is there an infinite number of them? Are they just something that was sealed away, or are they a thing that kind of coexist with time? For them to exist in that hallway makes me kind of, like I said, is it like a Dahaka from Prince of Persia: The Warrior Within? Like I said, is it kind of a similar situation of that there's just a price for messing with time, and these time demons just happen to be it, or do they just happen to be sealed away by time? Those are some interesting questions, but holy crap, it's kind of interesting to think about that. But like David kind of pretty much wiped off a lot of who he would once consider friends, frenemies in certain cases, like Clark, off the board. And once again, there's a whole complicated relationship. He looks at Farouk as an enemy. Farouk kind of is like, no, let's not even forget, like, even in that time dimension Farouk was singing too, it's like, maybe that's just supposed to show, like, the influence David has over everyone. Like, that was him kind of making everyone sing along to kind of, him kind of uplifting himself of like, oh, everything's kind of dire. It's like, no, one more battle, one more chance for hope to fix all of this. It'll all be okay. Like, I had to do this for this sake, but the fact of the matter is, once I'm done, everything will be okay. But the question then becomes, when it's all said and done, will it be all okay? Even if he changes things in the past, maybe certain things are set in stone to the point that there won't be any fixing it. Maybe things might play out a little differently, but maybe things, all roads lead to this future. Maybe. What about, Switch? Like, obviously we know this takes a toll on her. Like, what's that situation going to be like? I am very, very interested to see what the next episode has in store for us. We are down to the wire, ladies and gentlemen. Only 3 episodes of Legion left. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens next. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.